Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. So my name is Pete LePage, and I got to say I'm a little bit intimidated to have go on after the last session, and this next session that's coming up sounds pretty intense. So I'm going to try and just sort of give you guys a good overview of what we've done with Internet Explorer 9 with the new JavaScript engine and some of the ways that we're making the browser run a lot faster, be a lot more efficient, much more standards compliant. I'm going to say this now. I'm sorry for IE6. At this point, like, IE6 is a 10-year-old browser. We need your help getting everybody off of it, getting them onto IE7, getting them onto IE8, and as IE9 ships, getting them onto IE9, right? We're working as hard as we can, but we need your help. Anytime you go in and have cases where folks are using IE6, encourage them, talk to them, get them off of IE6 onto IE7 or IE8. So this morning I was sitting in the opening session with Ben and Dion, and I gotta say, those guys stole my 2 opening slides. Now the slides look a little bit different, but the concepts are the same. When I kind of look back at how the web was in the early 2000 timeframe and many, many years ago, it was all about going and consuming content. There wasn't any interactivity to it. And as the web has progressed and has gotten better and more interactive, we've gotten to a place where today, things like Netflix or Facebook give us really great interactive experiences that allow us to share information, to be able to get stuff, share things with our friends, and not have to just consume. And I think as the web progresses and gets further, we're going to see a lot more interesting applications. People are going to be able to start building applications that sort of feel native on their desktop. They feel just like they're running a desktop application, but without feeling it in their browser. This is the screenshot of the IMDb panorama that we did as part of the IE test drive site, right? It gives you full video support, panning and zooming, all sorts of really cool stuff. And where it comes down to is, as we started working on IE9, we sort of came up with 3 main pillars that we worked on. And I'm going to talk about 2 of those pillars today. We started around the AllAround Fast. The browser just has to be fast, whether that's JavaScript, whether that's rendering, whether that's opening a new tab, whatever that is. The entire browsing experience has to feel fast. We need to take away the feeling that some folks have that things aren't as fast as they should be. We need the browser to be clean with a focus on your sites. Get rid of all of that great amount of space that takes up and try and get the browser so that it gets out of your way. You can do what you want quickly and easily. And interoperable, right? HTML5, CSS3, HTML4, JavaScript just has to work. You don't want to write your code. I don't want to write my code. I spend a reasonable bit of time writing websites and that. I don't want to have to write my website multiple times for multiple browsers. So let's take a look at what we mean by AllAround Fast as we started to build that out. One of the things that we looked at and the way we try and build the browser is really based on data. So what are people doing? How are they using it? And so one of the things we did is we went and we took a whole bunch of news sites. And we sort of, I anonymized these down to news site 1 through 5 because I don't want to pick on certain websites, because you'll see why in a moment. But we anonymized these popular 5 news sites down, and we looked at where they spent different time in the different components of the browser. So we came up with sites 1 through 5. You can see, the total file size. News site 1, 3 megs to download and look at that web page, right? Like that home page is 3 megs to download that. Whereas news site number 3, 300K. It's nothing. Like, it's completely, significantly smaller than the other one. So we looked at what they're using, how they're going about using the different rendering engine components and the different components of the browser. And I talked about the size difference, right? Huge, huge differences in size. Lines of JavaScript code, right? 3,000 lines of JavaScript code versus 20,000 lines of JavaScript code for a news site, right? Think about any news site you go to today. They're all doing about the same thing. They're showing you the news. But one's got 20,000 lines of code, one's got 3,000 lines of code. And then you look at the number of JavaScript libraries that you're using. How many of you guys, when you're building out your sites, are using more than one JavaScript library? Yeah, okay, I'm seeing a couple of hands go up. All of those things are going to affect the performance of your website. So we looked at how all this stuff goes together. And I'm kind of curious, which one do you think loads the fastest? If you think it's number 1, put your hand up. Number 2? Okay, a couple people for number 2. Number 3? Okay, a lot of people for number 3. Number 4? All right, anybody for number 5? Number 3, smallest site, fastest to load. Mostly because it's not pulling down a lot of stuff. You're not executing a lot of JavaScript. All right, which one's the slowest to load? All right, number 1. Who thinks number 1 is slowest to load? Okay, good chunk of people. Number 2? Number 3? Well, I guess we kind of eliminated number 3, didn't we? Number 4? Number 5? Number 4. Not that much bigger, but because of all the JavaScript that it's going through and executing, it's running a lot more slowly. So as we built out all of this infrastructure to really understand what's going on, how these sites are using this stuff, we came to a really interesting conclusion. Because of all these sites using different components at different times and different amounts, that it's not just about the JavaScript. So as we built out IE9, we needed to make sure that we built IE9 to be faster across all of the subsystems. If we made the JavaScript engine faster, but nothing else, well, okay, we've made a significant improvement, but we didn't fix all of the things that we could fix. So for us, it was important to fix all of the things that we could fix to try and make the browser as fast as possible, all up. In fact, when you average these out, here's the average for the news sites, right? So just over a quarter of the time on the average news site is spent in JavaScript. How do you think that changes for an AJAX-heavy website? So something like Facebook or any application that does a lot of JavaScript. Does it go up or does it go down? If you think it goes up, put your hand up. Okay, if you think it goes down, put your hand up. All right. If you think it does nothing, keep your hands down. Right. All right. I have a highly active audience. Okay. In fact, it goes down, but the amount of time you spend in rendering, because you keep changing things with JavaScript. You're going and manipulating the DOM. You're manipulating the content that's on the page. You spend more time. So that was an important sort of piece of data for us to realize and start building on. So let's actually jump into the JavaScript engine. So in IE8, we had this JavaScript engine. And the JavaScript engine would go, it would start downloading your file, and it would go and it would start interpreting right off the bat, right? And that works. Not terribly fast, but it works. In IE9, we built a brand new JavaScript engine called Chakra, all right? Basically, we wrote it from scratch to be standards compliant with ECMAScript 5, to run a lot faster. In fact, I'll pull these, our principles up. So principle number 1, needs to be fast for real-world websites, today and tomorrow, all right? Yes, I'll skip to the 3rd one. I checked today, it has full support for Vapor.js. Awesome. All right? But the second one is modern JavaScript language support. We have full support for the ECMAScript 5 language specification with one exception, all right? So we've gone and done a ton of stuff to make sure that JavaScript is standards compliant, works with the same markup, does the same thing across all the browsers, and is a lot faster. So how did we do that? This is where I think we get into some cool stuff. So by default, as we start pulling down our code, all right, we start interpreting it right off the bat, because if we start to try and compile it as soon as we pull it down, well, we have to wait for it to compile. But as we start pulling it down and waiting for it and start interpreting it, as soon as we have it all on our system, we go and we compile it, all right? And that means that it's running compiled code, runs that much faster once it's done. Now, the cool thing, I think, at least to me, is we're compiling this in the background. We're optimizing for your whole PC. For people who are coming in on a Windows PC, one of the things that we know, again, through some of the data that we've been able to collect, is that most PCs today have more than one core. So if you have more than one core, might as well go and use that core for other things like compiling in the background. As soon as we've got the native code, we switch over to that, and we run through that. It means that your code runs compiled and that much faster than having to interpret every single line. All right? So I talked about doing the compilation and interpreting. We do that via some heuristics. So we're not going to go and compile every single bit of code on your page. We're not going to interpret every single bit. We look at what the best way to have a very fast experience on this is. And in fact, we tried this using Amazon.com's website to find out how they run. And when you run Amazon in a completely interpreted mode, we're 4% faster with the new JavaScript engine. If you go and, I guess I'm missing a word there. So if it's compiled, you have to go and compile that code, means you're going to end up being about 20% slower. So using the heuristics to go through and understand how much faster your code is running gives you a really great opportunity to be able to make sure that everything runs faster, much more efficient. So I'm going to pop over and I'm going to bring up a little demo here. And bring this guy over here. How many people have actually checked out the platform preview or IE9 beta? All right, a bunch of folks. That's awesome. You can download it. There's two things that are available. There's IE9 beta, which is what I've got up here. All right. The IE9 beta allows you to updates your IE installation, gives you the full IE experience. The other option is to install the platform preview. The platform previews are the things that we've been releasing every 8 weeks through the IE test drive site. And they install side by side with your current IE installation. The platform previews give you an ability to see what we're doing with the web platform. All right? So you don't get all the sort of look and feel, the browser frame or anything like that, but you get the still HTML5, you get the CSS3, you can see what's going on. We're going to keep releasing these as we move forward. So if you go and file a bug on Connect and say, hey, this doesn't work, or you find an issue, you'll be able to see those get updated as we move along. So I'm going to bring up this flying images guy. And as this comes up, hopefully we'll get a little bit more network so we get all our pictures here. So this is Internet Explorer 9. This is just some simple JavaScript, HTML4, and CSS2. There's nothing magic about this. This is not a Canvas demo. This is not a Silverlight demo. But you get a fast rendering like you've not gotten before. All right? You can try this in other browsers, and I encourage you to go try it in other browsers. I'm actually going to go back, and I want to bring up the fish tank demo. Because I really like, actually, you know what? I'm going to bring up Fish Tank over here first. So I'm going to bring up Chrome, and we'll have a quick look at the Fish Tank demo in Chrome. So again, this particular demo is some Canvas, SVG, HTML5 running on the page. So in Chrome, I'm getting what, about 20 frames, or 20 fish with 11 frames per second. I can go and I can increase that if I want to have 50 fish. Oh, my frame rate goes down. All right? So because Internet Explorer 9 is using the faster JavaScript engine and using GPU acceleration to get those guys rendered on the screen, you get a much faster, or you get a fairly slow experience in Chrome because they're not using the GPU acceleration. I'm going to get out of this so that we have a similar experience. Let's try this, the fish tank over here. And we'll let this guy load. Because you get the faster experience, we're going to get a much higher frames per second rate in Internet Explorer 9, as long as we get a net connection. All right, come on, fish. All right, there we go. So 20 fish, I'm running at 50 frames per second. All right, so between the JavaScript and the new hardware acceleration, we're able to run much faster. So I'm going to get rid of these guys. All right. So if you'll think back to the spinning images, what's going on there? And in Internet Explorer 8, for one sort of animation to run, so that's just moving the images one little bit, we spent over 1/10 of a second in the JavaScript engine. So going through and running through the JavaScript. This purple part here, this is doing the DOM manipulation. This is saying, hey, go grab this element, move this from here to here, and then the yellow part is the actual rendering. So it took us about 1/2 a second to do one iteration. That's why IE8, if you try this today in IE8, you get such a low speed. In IE9, because we're compiling the JavaScript and the hardware acceleration, you get an entire revolution, an entire animation in less than 1/10 of a second. All right? So you get a much faster experience. Now, I think it's really also important to have a look at, we talked about some of the pillars that we had for i9 and for the AllAround Fast. We do look at some of the benchmark scores. All right? And IE8, we were up at around 3,500 milliseconds. All right? So we were slow, to put it mildly, in IE8 for the SunSpider benchmark. We've been working to bring that number down. At PDC, it was pretty much this time last year, we were up at about 750 milliseconds. Today, in IE9, the difference between us and the Chrome Nightly is 77 milliseconds. All right? Now, for the most part, if you can see 77 milliseconds in a test that takes as long as this does to run, that's pretty impressive. All right? So there's a lot of work that we're doing to make sure that our JavaScript engine runs much faster and much more efficiently. And we're still not done. There's still lots of work to go here, and we're working to get that number down. So one of the things that's interesting in looking at the SunSpider numbers is when you look at any of the performance tests, and I encourage all of you guys to go have a look at the IE blog. There's a couple of blog posts up there, but there's one that's really interesting that goes in and does a really good analysis of some of the different JavaScript performance tests out there. And the SunSpider test is just one of them on there. But the SunSpider test, because it runs things so often and so many times, it runs the same test multiple times, doing JIT compiling makes a huge difference. All right? But it doesn't count the compile time in there. So it's really important to look at how those tests are being used and what they're doing. So when you're looking to compare browsers, look at how they're doing, not just particular benchmarks, but how they're doing for your site all up. So let's talk about some of the new things we've added, some of the things we've done and changed. This is not an exhaustive list, and I'm not going to bother reading them all out because I think you guys can read them all yourself. But we kind of fixed a couple of big ones, like, say, get element by ID. Yep, that one actually probably works. Full ECMAScript 5 support, I put almost in there. I mentioned that there was one thing that we don't have, and that's strict mode, but we've got everything else in there. Still opportunities to go through and try them and play with them, so I really encourage you to do that. We have full DOM level 2 and level 3 event support, which means add event listener finally works. You don't need to go back and write multiple lines of code to make things work in IE9. Actually, that's a sort of, I'll sidestep a sec and just mention, as you start playing with testing your browsers or testing your applications in other browsers, just give IE9 the same code that you give Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or Opera. And I will be willing to bet that you will find that it works without any problems compared to other things, or compared to other versions of IE. Now, we are still in beta, right? So there are still bugs in our stuff, but we're getting there. And we're going out and we're fixing those things. There's also a bunch of other technical things that we sort of did a little bit deeper. There's a new object type system for those of you who are looking at some of the type stuff. Because the new JavaScript engine is written from scratch and is actually written in native code and lives inside IE now. I'll talk about what that means in a sec. But we now have to deal with numbers in a little bit of a different way, or different variables in a different way. So it means we've got a much faster way of dealing with that. We've got new regular expression engines, which go and heuristically decide which one you want to use so that you've got a faster experience. And then the other thing is we're being super conscientious about, hey, backwards compatibility is important, right? You want your sites to work that you wrote today in whatever browser comes out. So if you're using any of the XUA compatible switches, or if you're using anything that throws IE into one of the previous rendering engines, that's going to still work. And in fact, we've versioned the JavaScript engine. You get the speed performance, but get the IE8 or IE7 or Quirks mode behavior. So I mentioned that we're doing a bit of work around moving the JavaScript engine into the browser. In the past, if you wanted to go and make a call from the DOM, or through JavaScript to the DOM to move an element, you had to go through this rather complex COM chain, and it was a real... You didn't see it as web developers, thankfully, but the browser dealt with it. And it was a fairly expensive process. That's over there on the right. You had to go through the COM elements. Well, now in IE9, you don't have to do that anymore. JavaScript, the Chakra engine, is built into the Internet Explorer 9 engine, making things run a lot faster and a lot more smoothly. How many folks are familiar with the MS Performance stuff? Okay, one hand. So one of the things that I find fascinating is that we've been working with the standards bodies, the W3C, in order to find ways to make it easier for you to profile and look at the code that you're running, to understand what's going on, to understand how things are working so that you can go, okay, well, I'm running into problems here or here, or this is what's going on. So there's a new window object called MS Performance. Now it's called MS Performance right now because the spec for it in the W3C is still under development. We haven't locked it yet with the W3C. Chrome has gone and implemented it, and I believe they've got chromium.performance. So you can get an idea that this is something that we're all building together within the W3C to actually build a set of performance APIs to go and be able to measure those things. I've just got some real simple code there, but you can say, hey, var nav start w.msperformance.timing.navigation start, which will go and give you the number of ticks after a particular time, and then you can go and convert that. So you can actually see, hey, this is when my page starts rendering, this is when it stops rendering. You can understand how requests get made, what are happening within your requests. So in addition to the new JavaScript stuff, some of the other things that are happening are the hardware acceleration. And Ben and Dion sort of talked a little bit about this morning, but by using the power of your whole PC, using the GPU that's in there to accelerate your markup, you're not just accelerating Canvas, you're accelerating your entire markup. So whether that's HTML4 and CSS2, or whether that's Canvas and SVG, HTML5 video, with GPU-powered HTML, you're actually accelerating the entire experience. It's going to mean that things get rendered onto the screen much more quickly and in a much better experience than ever before. So at the same time, that sort of leads into making sure that we do a great job implementing the HTML5 and CSS3 stuff. So that sort of leads me right to interoperability. And interoperability, defining the same markup, is a really important thing, right? We want to make sure that the code you write works the same across all the browsers. We want to make sure that the JavaScript is fast, that it's interoperable. And when you go and write code, that you're not having to write things for different browsers and different experiences. So with Internet Explorer 9, we're spending a lot of time really going through to understand what's going on and make sure that we have that documented and we've got a good set of tests. Right? This is a rendering. This was grabbed probably about a month ago. So there may be a few minor changes on this, but last I checked, there aren't. You know, this is using the border radius CSS3 property. IE9's got rounded corners. The borders look about right, but as you try and look at all the other browsers, what you're getting is you're not always getting the same thing. So as we build this out and understand what's going on, we want to make sure that we're building out HTML5 and CSS3 in the way that you're using it. And so to do that, we actually went through and we looked at the top 7,000 websites and we said, hey, what are the APIs, the JavaScript APIs you guys are using, all right? And so this is just some of the data. And you can see how quickly that graph drops off for the number of, for what APIs you're using. Index.of used as sort of as the #1 API across all of those top 7,000 sites, used on 94% of sites. The first one that we didn't support, we had to get to number 27, add event listener. We've gone and added that. So we want to make sure that as we build out our standards, we build them out in a way that's interoperable, that works so that we can test them, and that they're things that you're using to build the sites you need today and the stuff that you'll need tomorrow. And we're doing this with working through the W3C, with ECMA, who's the standards body that creates the JavaScript spec. The JavaScript spec for ECMAScript 5 was just ratified this past December, and was a really great opportunity of all of the browser vendors working together to create a spec and a standard that works for all of us. And part of that is creating a test suite that we all agree to and sets the standard for the web and sets the standard so that when you write your code, things just work. In the IE8 timeframe, one of the things that we did for CSS 2.1 was we actually went and took our CSS 2.1 test suite and we donated it back to the W3C because we kind of looked and realized that the CSS 2.1 test suite that the W3C had about 100 tests. All right, now you guys know what CSS 2.1 looks like. It's not exactly a small spec. So we're doing that same thing with HTML5, with CSS3, and in fact we're doing it with JavaScript. So we have just donated over 2,200 tests back to a test conformance suite with the ECMA with the ECMA standards body to go and create a test suite that actually tests the JavaScript spec in a way that is interoperable, so that we can go and all agree that, hey, when you call this API with this parameter, you get this. if you call it with an invalid parameter, you get the same behavior across all of the different browsers. Because if you don't do that, you end up with the experience that we kind of have today, where things don't exactly work. So this is something to me that's really great and is going to help make our lives as developers much easier and work much better, because we're going to be able to write the same markup and have it work across all our browsers. One of the other things that we've gone and done, some new developer tools, the F12 developer tools. They're built into the browser. They're there by default. Just hit F12, brings them up. Those F12 developer tools, we now have a network inspection tool. If you've ever tried using Fiddler before, well, that's built into the browser. It doesn't sit there as a proxy. We've taken the console tab and made it into its own tab. So you've got access to that. You can change the UA string just by going and doing basically tools, change UA string. Tried to make this stuff easier for you, for me, to go and write the sites that we want. So I kind of moved through things quickly because I wanted to leave some time for questions, but you can see where we sort of started. With Internet Explorer 9, JavaScript engine, new hardware acceleration is going to make things run a lot faster. All right? Getting the browser to be cleaner and more streamlined so that folks can get to your sites easier, that your sites stand out instead of the browser being the center of everything. And that things that are interoperable. The markup that you write just works, whether you're in IE9 or in any other browser. So the beta is available today. You can download it at IE Test Drive or at beautyoftheweb.com. You can get the platform preview at IE Test Drive, and that installs side by side, so you're not going to go and nuke your IE installation. It does need Windows 7 or Vista to install because of the hardware acceleration stuff, but it's super easy to install. I noticed that there are a lot of silver-colored laptops instead of my black-colored laptop up today. Just install a VM. You can get the same experience. You don't get the hardware acceleration, but you still get the IE9 experience. And you can test your website, play with your website, see how the browser works. See some of the new things like hardware accelerated canvas and video. So with that, I'll open it up to questions oh, yes. So if you didn't get one of these lanyards, I think they're kind of cool. I was only showing these today because you pull this off, and there's a nice 2 gig USB stick here. So quick, easy way to be able to share stuff. And I'm not using it as bribery to go download the bits, but the bits are on here too. So if you want to go try the bits, you don't even have to download it. So with that, I'll pop it over to any questions you guys have. Yes, oh, Doug.
So when will IE9 final have the complete ECMAScript 5?
So we haven't at this point figured out whether we're going to get, we haven't said much about strict mode. So you're just going to have to sort of keep an eye out there to see what happens. I'm not sure what the decision has been made yet.
ECMAScript 5 has no provision for subsets. So ultimately, if you want to claim that your standards compliant, you're going to have to do the whole thing.
Okay.
So earlier you were saying you were planning on doing standards compliant.
So I'll make sure that I update those slides to make sure they include that. Fair point. And the goal is to get there so that we work with the same markup, work well, standards compliant. So, yeah.
I have a question on the test suite thing.
Yep.
I would argue that in general, if I like the work on the test suite, I really do. But I think there should be a way to actually contribute that. What's your take on that? Because I think if there's a test suite coming from one vendor, it's usually pretty flawed by default.
So I'll repeat the question, and please just make sure that I got it correct just so that everybody can hear it. But what are the options to contribute back to the test suite? Because if it's just one vendor doing a test suite, you end up with, a slightly biased test suite. And anybody can participate in the test suite creation for ECMAScript. Right now, the stuff is sitting on our site because we're moving those over and we're giving them to. For the HTML5 and CSS stuff, those have to go through the W3C. They have a process in place. I believe that there is a similar process in place for the ECMAScript task force in order for those guys to get the tests in there. All right, there's one way at the back. So the question was, what's the release date? We haven't announced a release date. We want to make sure that we get the browser built really well so that the same markup just works, so that we're not going and shipping, you know, a browser with a broken implementation of any particular thing. We want to make sure we get it right. So roughly, don't have a rough date for you. I wish I did, but I don't have one for you. And then we're going to go through and we'll look at how we sort of encourage users to upgrade. We will be working as hard as we can to get users upgraded as quickly as we can. So I'll take one last question up here and then I'll call it good if that works.
What is your personal take on the browser in general? Is it just another GUI application that helps the network I/O, or how do you think about it?
So the question was, what's my personal take on what is the browser? Is it just sort of another GUI I/O with a network stack built in? That a fair representation? You know, I think the browser is a really awesome platform for us as developers to build applications that enable our customers and our friends and our family to do really cool stuff, and for us to show off the stuff that we like to do.
But so is Excel, right?
It is, but it's not such a platform. And that, to me, the web is about the platform. It allows you to go, for us to go and build stuff that we haven't been able to before, especially now with Internet Explorer 9, with HTML5 and other browsers.